Hey guys, so earlier today, Nvidia announced their 30 series graphics cards, and there's already quite a lot of information floating around, quite a lot of speculation and stuff like that, and there's a couple of really good videos already out there that go through all of the details that we know, at least so far, without benchmarks other than those that are produced by Nvidia themselves. But I'll put a couple of links to some good references that I know and trust below. But what I wanted to do in today's video is basically just talk about this from a, I guess, a simmer's perspective. So sim racing as well as flight sims, because I feel like there's some things that are unique about what we do that sort of set us apart a little bit from the rest of the gaming community. And a lot of the opinions and things like that you're likely to see over the coming weeks in the lead up to the release of these cars may not necessarily apply to us directly. So a big part of what we're seeing this time around is raw performance jumps, and that is very welcome. If you cast your mind back to the jump from the 10 series to the 20 series, you'll remember most of the hype was around ray tracing or RTX. And as it turns out, or as it turned out, most of what we sort of saw in theory wasn't really realized until far later on down the track, if at all now. I mean, it's been 2 years now since those cards came out, believe it or not. And, you know, we're only sort of just now starting to see ray tracing be commonplace in most new games that are released. At the time, it was really only just the Tomb Raider title and a couple of other titles that really took advantage of that. And even now, the sim racing titles that we have, at least that I'm aware of, none of them support ray tracing at this point in time. So correct me if I'm wrong on that, by the way, but as far as I can think, none of them do. So when you looked at it outside of those new features that the RTX series brought to the table, there wasn't a massive amount of compelling reason to upgrade from a 10 series card to a 20 series card, particularly, you know, for those casual gamers that are, you know, gaming on a single screen at lower resolution. And, you know, most of those people were able to achieve the frame rates that they needed to be able to run their games at the native refresh rate for their monitors at those lower resolutions with the 10 series cards already. At the time as well, remember too, that cryptocurrency and mining were absolutely massive. They were going through that big boom. So Nvidia were maybe being a little bit lazy with exactly what they brought to the table as well, because people were just buying their cards like hotcakes anyway. There were massive delays around availability, and they could basically release whatever they wanted and people would lap it up. But fast forward to now in the 30 series upgrade, and what we're seeing now is what appears to be, at least from the literature that we've got access to now, a very significant jump in terms of performance. It looks to be about a 100% increase or doubling in performance over the equivalent 20 series cards from the last generation, at least when it comes to rasterized graphics, ray tracing and things like that aside, because they're not really relevant to what we're talking about in today's video. Now, I'm anticipating that in the general wider gaming community, we will see a lot of comments around, well, why would we pay all this extra money for something that gives us extra performance that we don't need anyway? And that's very true for a lot of people, as we were discussing just before. If you're already able to run your games with maxed out graphics settings at the native resolution and refresh rate of your panel without issues, then there really is not a huge compelling reason to upgrade to begin with. So I anticipate that we will see quite a few people saying that it's stupid to upgrade, but you got to think about it in the context of sim racing specifically as well. So for those of us that are running triple monitors or VR headsets especially, I think that, you know, that performance increase is going to be very, very, very significant to us, and something that may well be worth the upgrade. If it's the difference between having to really sort of sacrifice in terms of the overall visual quality to get those frame rates at the point where we need them, then, you know, that could be a very, very compelling reason to upgrade. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some more hard results to, you know, an independent testing from the likes of, you know, Gamers Nexus and such, to see exactly where we end up. And I'm hoping to be able to do some testing for myself as well. I'm going to be making a few phone calls and sending a few emails over the next few days. So I'll just quickly bring up on the screen for you now the Nvidia website. Let's first talk about the raw performance with rasterized graphics as well as RTX. And then we'll talk about some of the other exciting features on these cards as well. So if we zoom in quickly here, we can see over here, Borderlands 3, Doom Eternal, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Control with RTX on. Let's just look at the ones with RTX off. Now, of course, I'm sure they're choosing the games that give the biggest performance increase here. And unfortunately, there are no sim racing titles that we have data on just yet. But you can see here the 2070 Super and 2080 Super. The 3070 is roughly 40% faster than the 2070 was, but the 3080 is just under twice as fast, or twice the performance of the previous 2080 Super. So this is what we were talking about before, with the 3080 kind of being more like the TI and the 90 being more like the Titan previously. So you can see, interestingly, they've omitted the 2080 Ti from the mix here, because I'm sure that would be further up the ranks, obviously, than this would be. But you can see there is a pretty significant performance difference. Now, if we go across to with RTX on, you can see the difference is even larger. So between the 2080 Super, which is this guy, and the 3080, almost double the performance. This is 2 and this is 1 here. So probably, yeah, 90% faster, 80 to 90% faster. So that is pretty darn significant. Obviously a bigger gap with ray tracing turned on. But let's have a look now at some of the other, what I think are more interesting details, raw performance aside. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff here we can scroll through. We won't go into all the details on the marketing stuff. You can see pricing there, $14.99 for the 3090, $6.99. These are US dollars, by the way, and $4.99 for the 3070. I'll scroll down here. One interesting thing that they have made a big deal about is the cooling. Now, this raises a couple of questions in my mind, and I saw Steve from Gamers Nexus had similar concerns as well. This is sucking cool air in and then blowing hot air out the top directly into the path of your air-cooled CPU cooler. So if you are running air-cooled CPU cooling, this could well be an issue, because it could push those temperatures. Obviously, you're starting off with higher temperatures to begin with here, so that then pushes through. So this, I don't think we're going to see this same cooling solution on the third-party vendor cards. I think this is going to be probably only the Founders Edition card that we'll see this on, but obviously depending on how well it performs, we'll stipulate whether third-party vendors bring this on as well. But interesting design there. Definitely something that I'm keen to hopefully have a look at and see how it impacts performance later on. We'll keep scrolling down now. Marketing stuff. Ampere streaming multiprocessors. So this enables double the floating point 32 bits throughput of the previous generation 2080 Ti, which is very, very significant, particularly for things like streaming, recording video and stuff like that. That's going to make a very, very big difference in terms of performance, and hopefully mean that people are able to have their graphics turned up more without having to sacrifice things like, you know, input lag, response time, and overall visual quality and fidelity to achieve those results. So we'll keep going down now. We'll see more detail on that once we have some proper third-party testing. We've got improvements on the second generation ray tracing cores and third generation tensor cores. So it's saying, again, double the throughput here. We're not too worried about ray tracing, at least at this point in time, for sim racing and flight sims. Then we'll keep scrolling down. We've got GDDR6X, world's fastest graphics memory. Again, we won't worry too much about this until we actually see some raw performance data later on. This is where we get to the more interesting stuff, I think at least. So HDMI 2.1 support. This means that finally we're able to take advantage of HDMI 2.1 as it stands on some of the newer TVs that are coming out now. So up until now, we've seen the gap, or at the moment, we're seeing the gap between TVs and monitors closing quite rapidly. And we reported on or reviewed the Omen 65-inch big format gaming display just recently. But that obviously had a display port on it, so it's not an issue there. But a lot of the new TVs that are coming out now theoretically have very, very good gaming performance, but because they've got HDMI ports on them and no display port, at least I can't think of a TV off the top of my head that has a display port. Other than maybe some of the newer LG TVs possibly, but I haven't had a chance to look at those in detail. But yeah, because we didn't have HDMI 2.1 support on our graphics cards, we weren't able to take full advantage of that functionality. So having 2.1 support on these new cards means that, yeah, for those TVs that have HDMI 2.1 support, we'll be able to push beyond that 98 Hertz at 4K limit and start going into maybe even 8K territory on 8K TVs with a single cable, which should be very, very good. It also opens up the possibility of multiple 4K displays as well. So people maybe wanting to run 3 4K TVs or something like that, performance aside, or performance limitations aside, that may become a possibility. So that is very cool. Continuing down now to AV1 decode supports. So this will be very interesting to see how this impacts performance. This is a royalty-free codec that's being developed between a bunch of different companies, and this theoretically halves the bandwidth requirement over that of H.264 codec, whilst maintaining the same level of visual fidelity, which would be absolutely awesome. So the fact that we have this cooked into the new graphics cards means that theoretically, again, at least, we'll be able to see this being processed on the side without impacting the overall graphics performance. So you shouldn't need to turn down your graphics and make sacrifices in that regard to maintain high quality streaming at decent frame rates. So going to be really interesting to see what that means. Hopefully, if that means for a lot of people, streaming and recording whilst gaming on the same PC will become possible. You won't have to have a second PC for people that require that level of performance. So definitely keen to see what onboard decoders can achieve in that regard. I think that could be an area that we see some very big improvements that might not necessarily get the attention that it deserves from the more mainstream channels that are just looking at gaming performance. And then we move on to Nvidia Reflex low latency technology. So again, this is something that I think is very, very exciting for sim racing in particular, as well as first-person shooters and competitive esports. Flight sim probably not quite so much because, as we've seen there, frame rates aren't quite so important. Input lag isn't quite such a big deal because the inputs tend to be a little bit more slower and less dependent on accuracy and, immediacy. So what they're claiming here is that this is going to reduce the overall system lag. So the time between you making an input with a mouse or a steering wheel or pedals or whatever the input device is and actually seeing that response on the screen and having that influence what's going on in the game in terms of physics and things like that. So look, this could end up being a bit of a marketing spin. I think that because, like we were talking about before, because the performance at the 20 series graphics card range is already, pretty much adequate for the majority of casual gamers, at least that are running at lower native resolutions and refresh rates, they need a way to kind of market the improvement in other ways. So it could be that this ends up just being a marketing spin. Again, we'll comment on this a lot more once we get our hands on these cars to test, but at least it looks like they're concentrating on the right types of things that are going to bring real world performance increases beyond just being able to crank the graphics up higher and increase frame rates. Obviously, those things are fundamentally important as the demand for higher quality graphics increases with new titles as they come out. But, seeing that they're focusing on things beyond just things like ray tracing and really focusing on what's core to the overall gaming experience, as well as for streamers and content creators as well, I think that these are all definitely good things. So that is my take on the situation, at least as it stands right now with a limited amount of information that we have available to us. And obviously, Nvidia can sort of pick and choose exactly what they want to use to show us to make it look as good as they possibly can. But once we get our hands on some cards and we see some independent testing from the likes of Gamers Nexus and so forth, we should be in a much better position to see exactly what we're up against here and whether it's going to be worth the money to upgrade. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Are you looking forward to these new cards? Are you going to be upgrading? Are you going to be placing a pre-order? Or are you going to wait to sort of see how the performance plays out in the real world? I think I probably won't do a pre-order. I think I'll probably wait and see exactly what the performance benefits are. Obviously, I'm going to be talking to a few people as well and seeing whether I can get my hands on a loaner or maybe one to keep beforehand as well to do some testing for you guys too. And it's a very exciting time, particularly when we think about the increases that we're seeing, the rapid rate of improvement with gaming monitor technology as well as VR. I think we're going to be seeing some really big leaps forward in the next 12 months with VR technology as well. We've got the HP G2 coming, which is very exciting, and we're going to see a lot more boundaries pushed in that regard too. And I think that a lot of the technology in that space is being limited at the moment by the ability of the graphics cards to actually push out the frames that are required at the resolutions needed to make that viable. So this next step up will hopefully unlock that next generation in terms of hardware as well. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below, guys. But that is it for today's video. So thank you very much for watching as always, and I will see you again soon. Bye.